I'm always amazed when we get to the end of a season because we are closing out something that has become really epic. I was just talking to a new acquaintance, and I told him that I had a podcast, and he said, "Wow, how many seasons?" And I said, "7 seasons." Is that typical? He asked. The average podcast has only 6 episodes. And they say that if you get to 3 seasons, it's kind of a big deal. We are closing out season 7, and it's not an end of it's not an end of a season unless I bring out Miss Audrey Weidlick to help me recap this season. So, Audrey, welcome back to Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership. Welcome to the season recap for season 7. How are you doing?
Hi, Galen. I'm so glad to be back here to wrap up another yet incredible and powerful season. Oh my gosh, I can't believe we are on season 7. And that statistic you brought up earlier, that kind of shocked me. That's a big deal for us.
That's a big deal. It's been an incredible ride so far. And 2024, we were acknowledged with 2 Global Podcasting Awards. We were awarded the Signal Award in the self-help category. So best podcast in self-help category by Signal Awards. And then the best host by the Davy Award. So we are having fun. I'm just so excited that folks are enjoying us having fun. So let's close out season 7 so that we can get to focusing on season 8. We've already got season 8 in the books. It's ready to go. All we need to do is close this out and we can start talking about season 8. So let's jump into how amazing these episodes and these conversations have been.
Yeah, let's get right into it. So we started our season off with Cliff Franklin, and he kicked the season off with a masterclass in bold leadership. He is the founder and CEO of Fuse Advertising. He showed us what it really means to disrupt the status quo while staying grounded in purpose.
So when I think about disruption, it's one of the things that the marketing community needs drastically. We still have advertisers out there, with a lot of Fortune 500 companies that believe television and broadcast television is 60-70% of their budget. So when you think about that disruption, we have to disrupt the way the traditional marketing models work.
Galen, I want to know, how did you and Cliff first cross paths, and how did it feel starting the season with such a powerful episode?
Well, I'll tell you, my introduction to Cliff was it was kind of sneaky because I didn't anticipate who he was. I met Cliff because his wife and my wife became really good friends, and my wife said, hey, look, he's a member of Kappa Alpha Psi. You might want to hang out with him. I'm like, all right, cool, let's have a conversation. Not only. Not only is he a member of Kappa Alpha Psi, he's a past president of our local chapter. He's the past president of our regional chapter, and he's the past president of the alumni members for our international chapter. He has sat on we call it the grand board, but he's sat on the grand board guiding the entire Kappa Alpha Psi organization, fraternity, for all alumni all around the world. And you talk about his being the CEO and founder of Fuse. Fuse is the 4th largest advertising firm in the country, and just his client base is just absolutely amazing. And so I didn't know enough to be nervous the first time I met him. He's really that dude.
He sounds incredible. You guys have to go and listen to our first episode of season 7 because it is quite the conversation and you can't miss it. So let's move from branding and boldness to a conversation about faith, community, and consistency with the 90-day Bible challenge. And oh my gosh, this episode must have been crazy. We had 5 participants on this episode. What a feat for you. So this episode featured a handful of participants from the 90-Day Bible Challenge and a few former podcast guests on the Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership podcast. Dr. Precious Boyle, Renika Weston, Bo Stevens, Clayton Beal, and Frederica Peterson. They joined you to share what happened when they committed to reading the entire Bible in 90 days. Galen, that's crazy. But what started as a reading challenge turned into a deep spiritual journey and a long-lasting bond.
I was trying to figure out how to use God as a strategy. God says, I want to be the foundation. I want to be in the details. Wow. And that's what was uncovered as we went through this process. God is not a strategy. How about let's make him the foundation of everything?
You had 5 powerful voices in the room for this one. What surprised you most about how the Bible Challenge brought everyone together?
Well, I'll tell you what surprised me most is that we could manage a conversation with 5 people. That was by far and away the most that we've ever had on the show. But I'll tell you, with the Bible Challenge, not only are we reading the Bible in 90 days, and to be fair, we did the 90-Day Bible Challenge in 120 days, so we didn't quite make the 90-day mark. But not only are we reading the Bible, but every Saturday we would get together and talk about how life has been revealed to us while we were reading. And so managing those conversations on a weekly basis made this a lot easier, a lot more fun. And to your point, it wasn't just about reading the Bible itself. It was about understanding life through the view and through the eyes of what the Bible was talking about. So I would challenge everyone to consider the 90-Day Bible Challenge. It's not something that I've created, but I've managed through it, I think 4 or 5 times now. And it is absolutely life-changing every time we do it. So definitely check out the episode, but do a Google search on the 90-Day Bible Challenge and see if you can find some friends crazy enough to go on that journey with you.
I just can't believe you've read the Bible in 90 days 5 times. That's crazy. Let's move from scripture to storytelling. Our next guest brings brand narratives to life. Christy Renee blends creativity and intention into everything she does. She is a keynote speaker and a brand storyteller. She reminded us that clarity begins with knowing when to pause, which really resonated with me.
There's always this opportunity for constant reinvention and innovation. And these are opportunities that we miss when we're rushing on an urgency or an autopilot. And we have power when we pause with intention.
You interviewed some big thinkers, but Christy brought something soulful and grounded. Tell me about your conversation with Christy Renee.
I really, really like what Christy does. Everyone understands, or at least I believe everyone understands, the importance of story. And the companies that we consider to be the most successful, the Apples of the world, the Microsofts of the world, the Coca-Colas of the world, they are masters at crafting the story that surrounds their brand. And she talks about how to do that as a company, how to do that for yourself if you are a solopreneur, an entrepreneur. And one of the things that she said that I really, really resonated with is this idea of just because you can doesn't mean you should. Because, when I first got into the space that I'm in now, well, there's a lot of things that I could do. There's a lot of things I'm relatively good at doing. But just because I could do it didn't mean that I should be doing it. And when I was able to make that transition and to see that clearly, that's when we started having success. I stopped trying to carry every episode and interview every podcast guest and edit every episode and do all the marketing. I started finding people that could do the job not only just as well as I could, but better. And that's when we started having success. So Christy really breaks down how you do that and how she does that with for companies and for people who are building a brand.
Yeah, as a communication major and taking a few classes in business, I've really realized just how big storytelling is and how important it is when you're trying to brand something or yourself. So her episode was just so important to anyone in this space. So I definitely encourage you guys to double back onto that episode. Let's move on to our next guest, who is a healthcare executive who found his voice and purpose far beyond the boardroom. Dr. Christopher Boone brought authenticity and emotional intelligence to the mic. As a global healthcare leader and strategist, he shared what it really means to lead with impact and presence.
I found my own voice, right? I didn't try to emulate anything that I seen. I learned to speak in the way that felt natural to me. And the most natural thing to me and how I learned is through storytelling.
Dr. Boone brought a lot of authenticity and heart to this conversation. What stood out to you most during your time with him?
First of all, Dr. Chris Boone he's the total package. He's the real thing. I have seen and I have met people who had a great knack for numbers. I've also met people who had a great knack for storytelling. I haven't met too many people who could weave both, and they can use numbers and data in storytelling as effectively and as compelling as Dr. Boone is able to do. He is a self-proclaimed data geek, but his ability to leverage data to tell a story has made him really president of the Club of One. He's got a very, very compelling story as far as his upbringing. We talk about jazz and just kind of playing off of the opportunities that's in front of you. His story is the embodiment of jazz, to go from where he came from, the kind of opportunities that were in front of him as a child and as a kid, to the scope of responsibility that he has now in corporate America and corporate healthcare is absolutely mind-blowing.
That's incredible. And yeah, like you said, his story really does embody jazz. We talk a lot about that metaphor, and his story just embodies that totally. So let's move on to our next guest and talk about building wealth and opportunity, one pitch at a time. Our next guest was Errol Silverman, and he's turning entrepreneurship into a movement with the world's next big thing. He is empowering Black and Latino founders through access, equity, and audience ownership.
What it is it's a television show like Shark Tank, and that entrepreneurs pitch looking to raise capital for their startups. But all the entrepreneurs, either Black or Latino, and instead of the panel of sharks investing, the viewers of the show can invest through our SEC regulated broker dealer right from their phones for as little as $10.
I have to know how you met the world's next big thing, Errol Silverman, and what you took away from this conversation.
Well, it's interesting how we met. I don't know how he got a hold of me, but I get this email saying, Galen, I've been watching you for a bit. I see all the moves you're making on LinkedIn and on social media, and I know that you're a coach, and I've got this television show that I'm getting ready to launch. Want to see if you'd want to be a part of advising some of the candidates, some of the participants on the show, as a coach and as an advisor. And the more I heard about what he was trying to do, the more intrigued I became. And as has become my custom, I said, well, hey, let's talk about this further live on the podcast. Like, let's dig into this on air with 30,000 people downloading our conversation. So that's exactly what we did. His approach to solving this economic gap that we see, he is really trying to invest in Black and Latino entrepreneurs, giving them access to funding that they might not ordinarily get access to. Great conversation. I love the creativity behind what he's doing and how he's doing it. Plus, he's got some really, really strong leadership insights in the conversation. Definitely worth checking out again.
Yeah, and definitely check out his television show, World's Next Big Thing. I don't think we've ever had a guest who has a television show. I think that's really cool.
We've had a couple of people who've been on television, But yeah, I know that we have not had anyone who has their own television show, especially one of the magnitude of Errol.
Yeah, Errol's episode is pretty hard to beat, but our next guest episode embodies resilience like no other, and that is John Register. He's a Paralympic silver medalist and certified speaking professional. John Register knows how to pivot with grace and grit.
I have to release the 5% of things I no longer can do and embrace the 95% of things I still can. And I don't know what those are yet. So there's a maturing process that happens, like your whiskey. It's a maturing and aging process that goes on so that you can get to the good stuff.
His story is all about turning setbacks into stepping stones. John's story is so powerful. What stood out to you most about John Register?
Well, I'll tell you, John Register has been one of the people that I have known for a while. When I first left corporate America, actually before I left corporate America, I joined the National Speakers Association, and he was one of the first people that I had met. And the reason he stood out to me was because he is an alum of the University of Arkansas, which happens to be the same university that my dad graduated from. And my dad used to always tell these stories about doing what he did at the time that he was there in 1969, because he was laying the groundwork for people who would come after him. And so then I meet John Register, who said, hey, graduated from University of Arkansas. And I made that connection to my dad's words. Not only was he a world-class athlete on his way to going to the Olympics, he navigated some challenges in a freak accident as he was preparing for the Olympics, and what could have ended his athletic career actually turned into, to your point, his earning a silver medal as a Paralympic. He became the United States ambassador to the Paralympic Games. Not only is he certified speaking professional, he's part of the National Speakers Hall of Fame. He's one of the best, not only just the best doing it, he's one of the best to ever do it. And I'm just really, really not only just impressed with who he is as a person, I'm impressed with the lessons that he talked about during his episode. I want to let you guys get to the little soundbite that we're going to share, but one of the things that he talks about is playing within the pocket, playing within the guidelines that's provided, and honoring the environment that was created. That's exactly what we have to do in jazz. That's exactly what John does on stages. And man, I'm just so honored that he was willing to share some time with us.
Yeah, if you're looking to be inspired, John Register's episode is definitely one to check out. Now let's hear from a leader that's helping other leaders flourish, Candacia Randolph. She challenges us to think beyond survival. As an author and organization development expert, she shares how leaders shape environments where people truly thrive.
When you think about people like Hitler and Stalin, that dude who wants to go back to the White House, those are all examples of people who are good, destructive leaders. They operate under the tenets of destructive leadership.
She talked a lot about ethics behind leadership, which really had me thinking, Galen. How often do you think leaders stop and really examine the ethics behind leadership? And tell me about your episode with Candacia.
Yeah, the conversation with Candacia, again, another conversation, another introduction on LinkedIn. We had a lot of similarities as far as our interests and passions in leadership. I think she had just gotten out of her doctoral program on leadership. So when we started conversing back and forth on LinkedIn, again, I said, well, hey, let's cut this conversation short and have a full conversation on the podcast. That's exactly what you have. She really understands a lot of not just the theory of leadership, but the practicality of leadership that goes into the work that she does. I could really appreciate the effort that she's put into understanding what it takes to be an effective leader. Again, just a great conversation. A great conversation for you to listen to again and again. And back to your question, I am not confident that unless you are in a doctoral program, that you really think about the ethics of leadership. I think at best, you try to be a good leader, you try to be an ethical leader, you try to do the right things, but how that impacts your organization in both tangible and intangible ways. I don't know that leaders really think about that. I could be wrong, but I think that they just hope that they do the right thing, and they've got attorneys, they've got teams that will keep them out of trouble. I think many would do really well to really study the ethics behind what's the impact of the decisions that are made from the seat that they're in.
That's really interesting. And if you want to hear all about the ethics of leadership, double back to her episode. Up next, we had a healthcare CEO who embodies lifelong leadership. Now, I was really excited for this one. Laura Kaiser, who leads with heart and strategy. As president and CEO of SSM Health, she showed us how emotional intelligence and adaptability create lasting impact.
It makes me think about parenting. So in parenting, you have a toolkit where you can reach in, you can rummage around and you can reach in the toolkit and take out the tool that says you do it because I said so. But you better do that sparingly because if you use that all the time, it completely loses its ability.
Her thoughts on lifelong learning, which really stuck with me, especially as I'm preparing to graduate college. Tell me about your conversation with Laura and how did you keep the mindset of lifelong learning alive in your leadership journey?
Yeah, Laura is someone that I have seen from a distance for a while. And then I got to know her a little bit better when I joined the board of governors for SSM Cardinal Glennon, which is a children's healthcare facility here in St. Louis. I've been on the board of governors for, I don't know, 7, 8 years. For a while, at some point, they're going to tell me that I'm not needed, but I just keep showing up. And in 2026, I'll be the chair of the board of governors. And so Laura and I are getting to spend a lot more time together. I was really impressed at how she was able to really talk about, she's really thought about and she's able to articulate her leadership philosophy. A lot of times people lead authentically and they do the right things because they believe it's the right things and they know what they believe, but they haven't really thought about how to articulate it. She was able to really share, this is what I believe, this is why I believe it, and I'm willing to stand on it. And again, just really, really impressive. And I love, one of the things that she says is that sometimes the gifts that come easily to you aren't universal. And you need to be self-aware enough to recognize that. Very often we think, well, if I do something well, it must not be that special. Everyone must be able to do that. And she's basically saying, no, sometimes you're the only one. Sometimes you're that girl or you're that boy or you're that guy, you're that lady, you're what is needed here. And if we shrink in the corner and try to hide our abilities under a bushel, the organization suffers. And I think the world suffers as well. So I just really, really enjoyed my conversation with Laura. I'm just so honored and excited to be part of an organization that she's leading.
Yeah, having her on the show was such a big deal to us. And so let's go from healthcare to high tech. Our next guest brought humility, vision, and real world wisdom straight from the lines at Cisco. Marcus Moffitt. He brought a refreshing take on what it means to serve as a leader, as vice president of solutions engineering at Cisco. His style is all about vision, humility, and team empowerment.
I really do stay involved with the team. I mean, not from an oversight or an overseeing job, but they trust me to be a part of the group, even though I'm in a senior leadership role today. I challenge them. And I think the most important thing is I allow them to challenge me. I tell them all the time, I don't need to be right. We need to be right. And we need to be able to execute together to get things done.
Marcus has such a calm, grounded presence. What stood out to you most about your conversation with him?
I'll tell you what stood out about the conversation I had with him is the same thing that stood out the first time I met him. He was one of my clients in a coaching engagement that I was participating in, and significant title, significant responsibility. I think he's leading like, I don't know, 12,000 people, some crazy number that I can barely imagine. And when we first met, he seemed to have some concerns about whether or not, because he was stepping into a new role, but he had seemed to have some concerns about whether or not his credentials brought him the credibility. And the more that we talk, I'm like, dude, you don't need any credentials. Just keep talking about the things that you're talking about. Keep sharing the message that you're sharing. And I dare anyone not to be compelled by your leadership charisma, your leadership gravity, because he understands what it takes to be a leader. Surely a lot of that comes from his time in the military. Surely a lot of that comes from his time kind of working his way up the ranks. But Marcus is one of those guys that you would follow into a battle anywhere. And if he said climb that hill, you'll get halfway up the hill before you realize that you're even moving. I just really, really enjoy Marcus, what he represents, and the common sense language that he shares his leadership philosophy.
Yeah, I remember in his episode, he said, I don't need to be right. We need to be right. And that really just kind of wraps up his whole episode in a whole. He talked a lot about empowering teams, and especially with the military background. That is so important. So let's talk about innovation with someone who lives at the edge of possibility. Robin Bolton is the founder and chief navigator of Mile Zero. Robin seems to kind of flip the script on innovation. She reminded me that creativity begins with courage, curiosity, and challenging the status quo. She talked about courage and what it takes to question your own ideas.
I tell myself, the person I'm talking to right now is the most interesting person in the world, and I can learn so much from them. And just having that mindset helps me ask questions instead of feeling like, oh no, I have to give answers or I have to correct.
What did you take away from that in your conversation with Robin?
Yeah, Robin again is someone that I was a colleague of. We were both coaches in an engagement. And we would obviously have huddles between session and just talk about what we were observing and what we thought was needed. And I was just really impressed with her ability to be erudite at times, right? She could talk about some sophisticated philosophy, and then she could be everyday and say, here, practically, this is how it needs to work. This is what's going on. This is what's happening. And this is how we need to articulate it. And much like Christopher Boone, usually you find people on one end or the other, and she was able to oscillate between the two. She is brilliant. I mean, Harvard educated, all the credentials, but at the same time, she understands how to get things done, and she knows how to speak the language that's necessary in order to get her point across. Just an enjoyable conversation, one that I go back and listen to when I'm looking for inspiration myself.
Yeah, her conversation was really inspiring, and you seem to kind of just hit it off immediately. Just so many key takeaways from that episode, so definitely go back. Okay, guys, the next guest is an exciting one. Everyone meet the sound behind the show, Sydney Evans. You know his work even if you haven't heard his name. Sydney Evans is our very own audio wizard and founder of Sound by Sid. He joined us to talk evolution, alignment, and purpose-driven work.
I didn't want to just be the editor for somebody. I wanted to have clients that I feel like are two different things. Clients are someone that you, over time, you have a longer-term relationship with, you build connections. I just didn't want to do editing for people for a month or two.
You two work very closely to create the magic that is Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership. What was it like having Sydney on the other side of the mic this time?
It was great to have I haven't really had a whole lot of in-depth conversations with Sydney. Usually our conversations are about the podcast, what's the vision, what's the best way to bring that out. We talk about individual episodes. He's the one that selects a lot of the sound bites and the snippets that we share. And so our conversations to this point have really been pretty transactional. But in this conversation, I got to really appreciate his understanding and approach to leadership. He also has a long-standing passion for basketball, so that was another thing that he and I connected on. And just his ability to understand and pull out the best parts of what people are trying to bring really does tie into what I believe leadership is about. The leadership is not about the person at the top of the org chart being brilliant. We've had eras where you've got the Jack Welches of the world, where the smart guys at the top, Steve Jobs. But today, leadership is about how do you bring the best out of what everyone else has to offer? Everyone shows up wanting to give their best. The leader's job today is to make their best possible and to make their best even more amplified. Sydney talks about that. He does that for our show. It was so amazingly refreshing to have him on this side of the microphone.
Yeah. He talked about so much about his story as how he became an audio producer. He talked about evolving businesses and life. And I don't want to spoil the whole episode, but you guys have to check out Sydney's full conversation and even get a behind the scenes look on the show. But let's talk about a coach who's helping leaders knock it out of the park. Michael Dill is a certified business coach who believes clarity begins with courage. His story reminded me that sometimes your calling comes when you least expect it.
Have you ever asked yourself a question and the answer just came automatically, you didn't even think about it? So I asked myself, what am I happy about my life right now? And the answer was, I'm happy I believe I found my calling. And I walked across the street, and across the street from my house is a church. And in front of the church is a statue of Mother Mary. And I got to tell you, Galen, when I saw the statue of Mother Mary, and I was shaking, sweating, chills, out-of-body experience to the point that if someone was to tell me, I wouldn't believe them.
And as I'm graduating college, I am waiting for my calling. You and Michael went really deep on mindset. And how does that idea of slowing down to speed up, as he mentioned on the show, show up in your own leadership?
Yeah, I really enjoyed my conversation with Michael Dill. I had one other conversation on another show with him, and just the courage that he demonstrated, the clarity that he demonstrated that he would drive for really came through, and I had to have him on Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership. I just really appreciate the peek under the tent as to the mindset that you have to have in order to be an effective executive coach. You have to be able to sense when people are hiding, when people are nervous and they're scared of their own capability. And then you've got to have the courage to call them out from behind their limiting beliefs. And that could be nerve-wracking if they are the senior vice president of Cisco for the Americas, like Marcus Moffett, or if they are the CEO of another major biotech company and your job is to help them reach for something bigger or better. That takes courage. And Michael really did demonstrate the kinds of things that we are paid to do. That's what these executives are paying us to do, is to call them higher. And that requires courage. That requires honest conversations. And Michael demonstrated that. So I just really appreciated having a conversation about the art of coaching with someone who's done this at the highest levels for quite a while.
Yeah, man, Michael Dill's conversation is definitely one to listen to. So now that we've covered business coaching, let's move on to one of our more braver conversations we had this season. Our next guest had lived both sides of leadership. Jason Armstrong is a former police chief, leadership consultant, and author. Jason led in some of the most high-pressure moments of modern policing as a police chief in Ferguson, Missouri. He taught us that leadership often means facing fear and choosing courage anyway.
Fear sharpens. I operate my best when I am afraid. or when I have that fear running through me, it helps me lock in, it helps me focus because I know there's only one way for this to play out.
This episode got real fast. What was it like sitting down with someone who's been through such high stakes moments?
I am often very, very proud of the accomplishments of my executive coaching clients, leading at some of the largest corporations on the planet. I've done some things in my own career that my mom is pretty proud of, relative to how I've shown up in some pretty large corporate situations. But I am always blown away when I get to speak to a leader who has done it, where life, liberty, and freedom weigh in the balance. I can't think of a situation more tenuous than the one Jason Armstrong stepped into. Everyone is familiar with some of the challenges that we've experienced in Ferguson, Missouri, and leading through those situations, nothing short of a miracle. But Jason came in afterwards. He was called in to put the community back together. So he had to understand what has just happened on someone else's watch. He had to honor that. And then he had to give the community confidence that he was going to be able to restore peace and that he was going to be able to allow them to return to what they had known prior to all the issues that occurred there in Ferguson. So to be able to lead through that is just absolutely mind blowing. Today, he's an author. He's a consultant. He's speaking all over the place. I see him all over LinkedIn, all over social media. Definitely a guy that you want to bring in when you want to talk about the importance of leading. One of the things that stood out about my conversation with him is he talked about fear. And he says that many times people try to run from fear. He leans into fear. He doesn't try to convince himself that he's not afraid. He leans into fear. And I just thought that was incredibly fascinating, how you could lean into and use fear as fuel to do things that you might not ordinarily feel called to do. So impressive conversation from an impressive leader.
Your conversation with Jason was absolutely incredible, and I recommend everybody go back and listen. But let's now pour a glass with someone who lives and breathes jazz, whiskey, and diplomacy, Mark Sutherland, who is the founder of Stone Ledge Spirits Company. His journey from the UK to the US is rooted in adaptability, strong relationships, and bold entrepreneurial moves. He reminded us that legacy starts with leaning in. Mark's story was a blend of diplomacy, entrepreneurship, and heart.
One of the keys to our success here is putting the right people in the right roles and building the right team in what we do. We would not have anything to offer if it wasn't for our distiller. I may be out there, selling and promoting and doing all the paperwork and the regulatory. Doesn't matter if I don't have the right distiller in there.
What left the biggest impression on you from that conversation?
Well, first of all, the bottle of whiskey that he dropped off, Stolak whiskey is the real thing. I mean, that part, talk about a way to kick off the conversation. Some really, really good juice. So hint to anyone wanting to be on Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership. If you own a distillery or have anything to do with a distillery, you drop off a bottle, boy, it's going to be a great conversation. But Mark's story was the embodiment of jazz. I can't imagine building an empire in the United States, especially when you're from the UK. So he moved here from the UK, where he was a diplomat. He comes to the United States, wanting to get into entrepreneurship, and then he starts to navigate all the laws, all the regulations that go into standing up a distillery. Just amazing. This guy really understands what it takes to stand up a business, and he's doing it at a very, very successful level. And if you don't believe me, just buy a bottle of his whiskey and you'll know this guy knows what's going on. Not only did he deliver a bottle of whiskey, he hand delivered it to my doorstep. So I actually got to meet him before we had the conversation. I tip my hat to Mark. He is one of a kind, and he is really, really doing this thing the right way.
Yeah. Who better to have on the show than Mark Sutherland, someone who owns and founded his own distillery? That is incredible. Our next guest is helping men reconnect. Owen Marcus is an emotional intelligence and men's wellness expert. He is creating space for emotional wellness in men. His work shows how real leadership begins in the body through the presence, vulnerability, and healing.
Being aware, and that's something that we weren't trained to do. And often when we start to become aware, the first thing we're aware of is our discomfort. So we don't want to be aware of it. But what happens is, like, I'd get people come to see me and they complain on one thing, that's not the problem. But your shoulders are up around your ears. Oh, no, it's not a problem. And then they start to relax and they start to come back. Oh, my neck and my shoulders are killing me. I go, you remember when I said that a few weeks ago? Yeah. Well, that's where you put your stress. Now that you're starting to relax a little, you're feeling it.
Owen's approach to leadership is so grounded in emotional and physical awareness. What did you learn from this conversation with Owen Marcus?
I really learned the importance and the value of following your calling. Because this is something that if you just look at the numbers, it doesn't make sense, right? His business model doesn't make sense because research will show you that men don't like to talk about their feelings. Men don't like to share that they're vulnerable. Right. We've got this whole machismo. We got this whole persona that we like to project in the world. And so to suggest that you're going to build a business around helping men connect with their vulnerability so that they can heal doesn't make sense on paper. But boy, I tell you, Owen makes it make sense because he really does understand how to bring out those pieces that you've been hiding and those pieces that could be sabotaging your success. So I learned a lot from listening to and having a conversation with Owen. From that, I went on my own spiritual retreat with another previous guest of ours. But it really did cause me to start thinking about how can I bring front and center those things that I've been trying to cover up under a bushel, trying to pretend like they don't exist. Owen is a great conversation to listen to.
Yeah, Owen's episode was incredibly powerful, and I especially recommend it to all of our men listening. I even took away a lot of insights from it. So let's talk about someone whose legacy work is woven into decades of diversity leadership. Global diversity professional and TEDx speaker Carol Copeland Thomas. She brought history, heart, and hard truths to our conversation. She has over 30 years in DEI, and she shares what it takes to build lasting inclusion.
When you look at young people as they graduate from high school or college, particularly the BIPOC community, Black, they are recruited in a very sophisticated, process-oriented way. Yes, you can have success in that area, but if you don't pay the same amount of attention in terms of how that young Black person, in this case, is going to feel comfortable in that organization and see themselves moving up the ladder in that organization, then you have failed already because you've done half your job.
She did not hold back when calling out performative DEI. Tell me about your conversation with Carol.
Carol is an icon in her space. She's not just a professional, but she is an icon in the space. And when I started getting into doing some DEI work myself, I realized pretty quickly that my contributions were going to be short-lived unless I actually did some study. So I started doing some study, and I shared some of that with Carol, but Carol brought even the research that I was bringing to the conversation. She brought that to life in a way that I had not anticipated. She is a professional speaker herself. She's been on the TEDx stages. She's one of the people that I met and got to know when I was in the National Speakers Association. And she's just really, really down to earth. And then some of the stories that she talked about really did bring history to life. I mean, we talk about the four girls who were killed in the bombing in the Birmingham church. come to find out they were friends of hers. They were personal friends of hers. We start talking about some of the people throughout history, such as Martin Luther King, such as Andrew Young. Well, her parents were friends of theirs. And it's just amazing how this one person can have such an exhaustive touch on history. She really brings that together in a way that I really appreciate it, especially in the times that we're in right now, where DE&I has been politicized, it has been demonized. We recorded that conversation at the beginning of this whole transition, but boy, those words really, really resonate today more than ever. I hope that from listening to that conversation with Carol, that we see organizations really start to embrace the benefit of DEI. And that is leveraging the diversity of the people that are in their organization, making sure that there's equity around how they are pulled into the decision-making rules, and making sure that they feel included so that everyone can bring their best. That's really what DEI is about. It's not really about what the politicians have made it out to be most recently.
Yeah, this conversation really stood out to me. I'm about to go to grad school for human resources, and she mentioned something. She said, "You've already failed if you focus on recruitment but ignore retention and belonging." And that quote I'm definitely going to bring into my career, because I think it's just so incredibly important for leaders and HR leaders to remember.
I gotta add one more thing into that, because again, that conversation was so impactful. You know, one of the things that we talk about is how much of the DEI space has been dominated by HR professionals. People coming out of HR have leaned into DE&I, and that makes a whole lot of sense in the world that they would do that. My approach into DEI has come from a different place, from more of a general manager's perspective. And one of the things that I truly believe is that my job as a general manager is to make everyone's best possible. It's my job to make it possible for you to feel comfortable enough to give me your best. You're going to do what I ask you to do to some degree, just because, you know, you value your job and I'm paying your salary, that kind of thing. But I'm not necessarily going to get your best unless you feel comfortable, unless you feel safe enough to bring me your best. And that's what we talk about in that conversation. That's really the magic behind DE&I. And again, I'm just going to double back on what I said earlier. I really hope corporate leaders and politicians will take a listen to that episode.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an important episode, especially at a time like this. So let's go on to our final guest, who took us full circle from pain to purpose and from belief to bold action. Nick Dillon calls himself the Believe Coach, and for good reason, too. Nick Dillon is an international speaker, author, and founder of Believe University. He turned his darkest moments into powerful mission to help others break through limiting beliefs.
When we say, or certainly myself, say this word believe, you're believing in action. And I want to call us to the understanding that when we are nurturing ourselves up to adulthood, teenagers, trying to find ourselves and learning who we are, through our experiences and our values and beliefs, then those that influence us, we consciously and unconsciously create these set of beliefs.
This episode is a must listen. Tell me about how Nick Dillon and you met, and what it's like reconnecting with someone through emotional intelligence training with.
Yeah, Nick is that guy. He's that guy. He and I met when we were both going through emotional intelligence training under Michelle Neverez, who has been on the show. So many of us connected after going through her program. So many of the guests I've had on the show that I've formed incredible relationships with. But when we were in that program together, Nick was always the guy that was quiet and sitting in the corner. And when there's a quiet moment in the conversation or the discussion seems to be waning, he would come up with the perfect thing to say, the perfect way to redirect the conversation, the perfect insight to consider. And it was clear to me that he was a giant. He was already a giant in the space. And now he has gone on to take his act all over the world. He is helping people in all countries really understand the power of belief. You can only be as good as you believe that you can be. And that is Nick's overriding message. I see so many of the emotional intelligence principles seeping into his conversations. I see so much of the passion that he demonstrated when we were in that program together coming in the conversation that he's having. I am just so excited that we were able to reconnect and do something together. We had tried doing some things coming out of that program, and they just didn't quite work out. The timing wasn't right. But boy, I'm so glad that he saved the best for this conversation on Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership. It is a treasure and would challenge everyone to check out.
I'm so glad we were able to bring Nick Dillon's story to the show. And I really do feel like this episode will resonate with all audiences. So definitely go ahead and check that one out. And I think that wraps up season 7, Galen.
Isn't that amazing? It's amazing that this idea that surrounded 3 things that I loved literally turned into a program, a connection point, a rallying cry that so many people from 20 different countries have enjoyed. We've been honored with several awards, but more important, we're just having fun. I'm just talking to folks that I have admired, and some folks that maybe I haven't even had conversations with before. We're having them fresh. We're having them for you. So definitely double back, check out all the conversations in season 7, but go back and just look at some of the archives, look at some of the archive seasons, just enjoy this thing that we've created. And then I think we're going to talk a little bit about how you can get a little more, because we've got some folks like Mark Pittman who have taken that extra step, and he's getting even more insight from this Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership program.
Yeah. Did you guys know that just for $4 a month, you can unlock exclusive access to immediate episode part 2 conversations of every episode? You can also get detailed show notes for each episode, sneak peeks at upcoming content through the What's Next newsletter, and VIP-only conversations with every single one of our incredible guests. You get all of that for literally just $4.
We're still at $4. We haven't raised it.
We are still at $4.
Oh.
We are practically giving all of this wisdom away. I cannot believe it. And you can get all of this exclusive wisdom at patreon.com/whiskey, jazz, and leadership. You got to go check it out.
That is, I mean, I'll tell you, the VIP room is where every guest seems to come alive. And we try to describe what the show is about. We try to describe the vibe on the front end of each of our conversations, but something comes alive in that last 2 or 3 minutes of our major conversation, of the part that we publish for all of you. And by the time we're done, they realize, okay, now I get it, and we're finished. That's what the VIP room is for. That's why they bring such great insights into the VIP room, because they finally have figured out why everyone has been tuning in all over the world to Whiskey, Jazz, and Leadership. I'm not going to go any cheaper than $4. I am not going to pay anyone to become a VIP. I just hope you join just to check out the content. I mean, you can join for 1 or 2 months, listen to all the episodes, and then cancel if you want. But man, I believe that once you're in that VIP room, once you're in our VIP community, you're going to know what folks like Mark Pittman, like Chris Williams, like Greg Foster, they all know, that the VIP room is where everything comes to life.
Well, Galen, I am so excited to be wrapping up season 7 with you again. I want to give a big shout out to you for bringing these incredible conversations to literally everyone. I think what you're doing is just so powerful and so amazing. I'm proud of the both of us for doing this. And I want to give a shout out to Sydney Evans, now season 7 participant. What a great season this was. I'm really excited to see what's next in season 8. And I'm just really happy to be here and to be able to have this opportunity with you and all of our listeners.
This has been fun. So with this being the end of season 7, that means that we're gonna take some time off. We're gonna let some of this simmer, but we're gonna come back with a strong season 8. We've already got some of our conversations lined up. We've got some Hall of Fame speakers. We've got some of my mentors. We've got tons of my friends who are doing amazing things all over the world. Can't wait to share this conversation with you. The hardest part of doing the show, I'm just going to share with you, Audrey, the hardest part of doing the show is recording the conversation and then just waiting before we get to share, because I already know what the conversation was. I can't wait for people to hear, but I got to wait because I can't put everything out. So hang on with us. Take a few days. Enjoy this break, but come back, get locked in for season 8, because I guarantee you that we are doing an even stronger job of bringing you the kind of wisdom, the kind of leadership, the kind of insights that you just can't get anywhere else. Until next time, cheers.
Cheers.
Hey, it's not too late. Hit that subscribe button so you're sure to catch the next episode. If you're really enjoying the vibe, leave us a review or become a VIP for guest and show exclusives. Cheers.